Hi, everybody. Welcome to another Chats with Jul2020, and I'm delighted to be joined by special guest today, Richard Johnson, President of the PDA. So, Richard, lovely to see you.
It's nice to see you again, too, even though it's virtual.
Well, the last time we met actually was in November, I think, in Gothenburg at the PDA event for Universal Pre-Filled Syringes. And a lot has changed since then, hasn't it? So, I appreciate taking the time out of your busy schedule to have a chat with me. What I wanted to do before we sort of go into the main interview, the main discussion, was to, if you could give a quick overview on the PDA for people who are not familiar. I know most people will be, but there will be some people out there who've not heard of the PDA or not familiar with what you do. So to just give a quick overview of the PDA and your role within that.
Okay, so PDA is a global not-for-profit organization whose mission is to advance pharmaceutical science and regulation, with the eventual goal, of course, to help patients. And so we've been around for close to 75 years now. We are global. We have 26 chapters around the world. We have our headquarters is here in just outside of Washington, D.C. But we also have an office in Germany, and we have an office in Singapore.
Right, and
I'm the president and CEO of the PDA and have been for almost the last 11 years.
So, I mean, and in fact, the Singapore chapter only opened recently, didn't it? That's the newest chapter.
We do have a Singapore chapter, but no, we have an Asia Pacific office
yes, you're right.
in Singapore now, and our German office is our PDA Europe office. So.
Right. So, moving on to the current situation, as you said, last time we spoke was at one of your conferences in Gothenburg for PDA Europe. Obviously, the world's changed dramatically since then. So how's the current situation impacted PDA and the activities that you're doing?
Well, certainly the whole world has had dramatic change since November of last year. This has become a global pandemic, and that's resulted in global disruption. We have to be aware hundreds of thousands of people have died. And beyond that, the health impact and the social and societal impact has been unprecedented in my lifetime. So just like everyone else, PDA has had to adjust and react to this changing situation, which has a lot of uncertainty and a lot of continually changing situation. Since March, all of our staff has, for the most part, been working from home. So like most people around the world, I think we're adapting to being more of a virtual online interaction, even among our team. All of our events, for the most part, have had to be converted pretty rapidly in some cases from a typical face-to-face event with all of the normal activities that are associated to a virtual. So we've evaluated many different platforms. We've selected them. We're using them. And I want to thank the tremendous amount of work from our staff, but also all of our volunteers, speakers, exhibitors, and sponsors that have made that transition along with us and continue to do so. So for the rest of this year, we've decided that almost all of our events, whether they're conferences or workshops, are going to be virtual. There are a couple that we may do as hybrid events, and we are still evaluating whether we can do some training, which of course involves smaller numbers of people face-to-face. We have quite an extensive training facility with actual pharmaceutical equipment here in our Bethesda offices, and that's not very easy to translate that to virtual. But at current, we are not doing any of that training because of the situation.
Right, and I mean, are members sort of turning to you for more support during this period? I mean, what sort of support are you able to give members? I appreciate you doing the virtual conferences and the other things.
Well,
are members coming to you with any particular needs at the moment?
Yeah, so certainly what I described for what is happening to the PDA staff is happening to a lot of people.
Sure.
Many of our members and customers are also working from home, so they're distributed. They don't have their normal avenues of communication. Certainly we are continuing to provide increased number, quite a dramatic number of webinars and various ways in which to keep people informed. We are doing a number of webinars and town halls with our members to keep them informed about what's going on in general, but also what PDA is doing in response. We have our science and regulatory activities have continued, if anything, at a higher rate. So at any one time, we usually have between 50 and 60 task forces that are working on development of technical positions on a wide variety of topics. Those are continuing, but we've also added some specific activities related to how the industry needs to respond to the coronavirus situation specifically. And so we are adding those kinds of activities that include not only the task forces working on developing technical guidance, but also hosting webinars to keep people informed about what is the latest thinking on how they should respond to questions such as, how do you deal with a situation where you can't host a live inspection, a virtual inspection? How do you do audits of suppliers that maybe has to be virtual now? But also, what are the appropriate steps to be taken to assure the integrity of the manufacturing supply chain in this kind of environment? So those kind of activities we're doing. We've also extended membership. So in other words, we have not canceled memberships for a number of people during a period here. We've opened up our PDA letter and our PDA journal to member and non-member and expired members alike for a period to try to help assure they're getting accurate information as much as we can provide.
That's really good. And that actually leads on to my next question, actually, quite nicely, which was, how do you think sort of the life science pharma community has reacted to COVID? And do you think there are things that we, as a sector, could have done better given the circumstances?
Well, I'm sure that hindsight will always point out things we could do better. But I have to say, and I've been in this industry for 40 years, I have never seen the level of public and private sector cooperation and collaboration, both within and between the public and private sector, to try to evaluate. Well, first it started with trying to come up with accurate diagnostics.
Sure.
And that effort has been much faster than ever before. Certainly some hiccups along the way, but that continues to be an important component. Even personal protective equipment and things like ventilators. The medical products community has rapidly responded to that. In the pharma sector, there has been a tremendous acceleration of evaluation of potential therapies. As natural, some of those are proving to not be quite as promising as we hoped. But timelines that normally take multiple years are being compressed in ways that I've never seen. And we certainly are hoping that the result of that will be effective therapies that will be available much sooner than what would be normal. And of course, the same is true for vaccines. The amount of organizations, both public and private, that are working to try to develop vaccines, not just through the traditional modalities, but through innovative new modalities. I've never seen the amount of effort. There's a lot of collaboration between companies, between public and private sector that are going on. So I think, judging by those things, I think our industry has responded extremely positively, really focused on, what can be done as quickly as possible to try to help minimize the impact of this kind of pandemic. That doesn't mean we're there. We still have a ways to go, and there are big challenges ahead, not the least of which is once we do identify these therapies or vaccines, how do we scale up to provide billions of doses for the world's population? And that is something that we're seeing a lot of focus on now. How do you suddenly go from the normal level of products that are required? By the way, they're still required. People still need other types of vaccines. They still need other types of pharmaceutical and biopharmaceutical products. That's not gone away. But in addition, now we're trying to provide all these additional products. And so evaluating, manufacturing capacities, ramping up suppliers as well. How do we come up with the number of packaging components, the number of syringe needles, for example, for vaccines? Those are tremendous impact on our industry. And I have to say right now, there's tremendous level of can-do attitude going on. And I'm very proud to say that we are part of that kind of effort. So.
That's great to hear. And a couple of things come out of that, though. Obviously, if you look at the sector over the last few years, biopharma has become a bigger and bigger part of the industry. And obviously now it's really come under the spotlight in terms of how quickly it reacts looking for vaccines. But also the supply chain has come under the spotlight as well, both from a local level and a global level in terms of that. So do you think moving forward now, this will all have an impact on those two areas, that biopharma will now even a bigger focus and small molecule drug development will sort of fall by the wayside, or will there always be a space for that? And how do you think the supply chain is likely to change going forward? Because you've got onshoring discussions going on, countries trying to sort of obviously keep drugs in-house and all that sort of stuff. So.
Yeah, I think that certainly small molecule is today and has been and will continue to be a very important part of the pharmaceutical sector. Most of the products that are used by patients around the world have been and will continue to be small molecule products. The biopharmaceutical products, however, are where the cutting edge development, the new therapies, the new ways of treating disease, and that's simply a reflection of the evolution of the science. As we understand the biology of some of these diseases, we're using biological mechanisms to respond to that. That's going to continue, I have no doubt. But that doesn't mean that anesthetics and antibiotics and high blood pressure medications and other things are going to still be important. Vaccines, I think, have always been around, but they haven't gotten as much attention because they're, generally speaking, pretty low incidence. A lot of it, they're being preventative. But I think this is certainly, a situation has highlighted the need to not only develop a vaccine for this disease, but to really look at how rapidly we could respond to the next situation. And so there are a lot of new ways in which vaccines are becoming, that are being explored to develop a vaccine. And I think that's going to continue to be a focus for some time to come.
Right.
I think as far as supply chain goes, I think that this has certainly shed some light on the fragility of the global supply chain, especially in light of a situation such as this. And so I do think there will be some review of redundant supply for certain critical products. Because the economics of some of those things are quite challenging, I think there will be some public-private cooperation in that arena to try to make sure that there are incentives for redundant capacity for things like antibiotics and analgesics and critical APIs, for example. So I think that's a very positive thing. You know, anybody that's worked in the industry knows the value of having redundant suppliers, because our world is constantly filled with unexpected events. And so like many times in the past, it sometimes takes a crisis to draw focus to it, but it's not that it's been invisible before. I think it's also bringing to light, from a regulatory standpoint, what they need to be thinking about, how they respond to this kind of situation. And I believe that this will just accelerate the efforts that were already ongoing to promote regulatory harmonization and growing interdependence between regulators around the world, because it is a global supply chain. That will not change. It will continue to be. I think there will be some focus on having some backup or some redundant suppliers, so you don't put all of your eggs in one basket, so to speak. But that doesn't mean that we're suddenly going to go back to the 1950s where almost every product is made within the individual country. I just don't think that's practical or even necessary. Certainly there will continue to be pressures on cost for these products. So I think that the combination of those will mean that there will be renewed focus on integrity of the supply chain. There will be some more focus on having some backup or redundant capacities, but we will still have a global supply chain, and we will still be interdependent as a global community on supplies from different parts of the world. And that will mean that the regulators and the industry is going to have to figure out how to be more efficient and more cooperative. And how do you assure that the same requirements will continue? You have to assure the safety and efficacy of those products. You have to protect them from, all kinds of challenges as far as counterfeiting or diversion. But you also have to be able to respond to a situation where locally that may not be a possible supply area for a period of time. And then how do you continue to provide those critical products? So there may be some more focus on inventory levels as well as redundant supply.
Right, that's right. One final question about the current situation, and we talked about supply chain and biopharma, and you mentioned regulatory. Do you think, though, that regulators are going to be under pressure to, in the race to get a vaccine out there, to sort of, I don't want to say miss things out, but be more relaxed, maybe, if you like, in some of the regulatory requirements? If you look at, how fast people are trying to get things to market with the vaccine, the political pressures people have got to try and get something out there. Do you think regulators are going to be under pressure to try and ease things to make it possible?
I think they're certainly, like everybody else, the regulators are feeling the pressure. It doesn't have to come from political. I mean, there's pressure just because we know there's a dramatic need. So I do think that I am personally pretty confident that the regulators have a very good sense of what their responsibilities are, and that they will continue to try to balance the cost, the benefit of a product. Every product, every pharmaceutical product has a risk-benefit analysis that has to happen. And I'm quite sure that will have to happen with these kinds of products as well. But I do believe that our regulators and most of our people in our industry understand that there's no real benefit to coming up with a product that does not prove to be effective. And so, you know, I think it's clearly there's a lot of pressure. You know, I'm a human being like everybody else. I worry about members of my family. I want there to be therapy as quickly as possible. Vaccines are not simple. They're not as straightforward as some products, but every product, every pharmaceutical product has potential side effects, has potential limitations on its efficacy. We're biological organisms. We're not all exactly uniform. And I think that there will have to be risk-benefit analysis for these products, just like there is for everything else. So yes, there will be political pressure, but it's the same political pressure that I think most of us feel anyway, which is there's a dramatic public need for these therapies. And I can only say that the people that I know, and I know a lot of people in regulatory bodies, they take their responsibilities very seriously, and I am confident that they will do the right thing.
Well, thank you for asking that question. That's a difficult question to be asked. So thank you for being so forthright in answering that question.
Certainly is something that there is a lot of discussion about, but again, you know, in my 40 years in this industry, I've had the opportunity to interact with many, many regulators. And I do think that regardless of what country they come from and regardless of which function they have, they all share a sense of responsibility that their job is to protect the public health. But that has two sides. One side is that they have to try to make product available that serves an immediate need, but they also have to try to make sure that it's safe and effective. And so I think they'll do a good job with that.
Brilliant. Well, thank you. Well, I've got only two final questions for you. One is, how do you see the PDA, the future of the PDA, and how it emerging out of this whole situation with COVID-19? And the second question is, again, much broader on a macro level, how do you see the pharma sector is going to look like post-COVID as well?
Let me take the pharma sector first, because that, of course, has an impact on PDA. So I think that the pharma sector and the biopharma sector, the broader sense of that, I think it will continue to be important. The trends that we were seeing before this pandemic began will continue. The science is leading us to more biologic therapies, very exciting new ways of addressing health needs. Cell and gene therapies, I think, will continue to be an exciting new area. Combination products, new delivery mechanisms are going to continue. The emerging markets around the world, as their economies and populations continue to progress, they will see an increased need for these kinds of products as well. So those things I think are going to continue. I do think there will probably be a lasting impact of greater focus on vaccines than maybe was common before. So more players are getting into the vaccine area. I think they will see that there will be continuing opportunities, especially as some of these new ways in which to develop a vaccine are being explored and may have application for other things beyond coronavirus. As we have already talked about, I think the supply chain will be getting some more focus about diversity, resiliency of the supply chain. So I think that's going to have some focus for our industry as well. As far as PDA goes, I mean, we've been around for close to 75 years. Over that period of time, the focus on promoting good science and good regulation for pharmaceutical products, that's not going to change in the future. I do think we had already begun to explore new ways to reach a wider audience through electronic communication. This is certainly accelerating that, and I think that we will be using some of those tools to reach people even more broadly than we have historically been able to do. You know, virtual world means people from all over the world can participate. Your biggest barrier becomes time, you know, the time zone issue. But I think we will continue. We will at some point continue to have face-to-face interactions. That's just human nature. But it may be that some of those will not be. I mean, I'm not sure when it will be possible to resume. We're certainly hoping sometime next year that we will see some of those come back. Certainly our in-house training, our hands-on training continues to be in high demand, and when the external situation warrants, I'm sure that will continue. But I am sure that we will be doing more virtual activities. And I believe that even when we resume face-to-face conferences, I think we will also offer it as a hybrid type event where people can also participate remotely, which will just accelerate our ability to reach a wider audience, which is something that we've been trying to do anyway. So in the short term, it's been a tremendous impact, change, just like everybody else. But in the long term, I think is going to accelerate our exploration and use of these new tools to try to continue to expand our outreach to people that otherwise might have challenges to be reached through our traditional modalities. So, you know, change is always a two-sided coin, right? It's a challenge, but it's also an opportunity. And I think we're in the midst of the challenge part, but we're also trying to look forward to the opportunity side.
Well, I think our conversation right now is a prime example of that, because as I said last time, you and I had a chat, I did a video with you live in Gothenburg, and now we're doing it remotely on Zoom, you know, here. So, you know, things change, but you have to adapt to the situation and make the most of the situation.
I've been in this industry a long time. Things have changed a lot that I've seen already, but I have to be fair and say I've never seen such a dramatic change happen so suddenly, and I think that that will have lasting impact.
Yeah, well, I interviewed someone, Martin Lush, who works for NSF, who is very senior there, and he talked about how leaders now in the post-COVID world have to be more challenging and ask more questions and be more curious, because you can't just think things are always going to be the way they are, and you have to be constantly questioning and asking and being collaborative and getting other people involved, and realize there's no one-on-one answer. You really need to be constantly saying, how can we do this better? Why are we doing it? What other things can we do to improve? And I think that is the way of the world now. You can't just sit there and say, well, we did it like this 3 years ago, we can carry on doing it. It doesn't work that way anymore.
Well, I think you're absolutely right. You know, that may be an advantage that we have. We're a very collaborative organization. We, you know, I'm the president, we have a staff, but most of the things that people recognize about PDA are actually performed by volunteers. They're performed by people. So so we have to listen to what they say. That's part of our DNA, so to speak. But I can also tell you that we are increasing our outreach to try to understand what other people are looking for and wanting. And I think you're absolutely right. And that person that you talked to is right. You know, this is a much more collaborative framework. You know, that's just the new electronic world, right? It's not just unidirectional. It's bidirectional, and it's like the conversation we're having right now. So
brilliant.
I'm having video conferences so many hours of a day that I have to remind myself to get up and move around.
I agree with you. I mean, I think that's the one thing people working from home, you realise you do much longer hours than if you were in an office, because you don't have that water cooler moment, and you don't go to the canteen, you don't go and grab something to eat. And actually, particularly an organisation like yourself and a lot of people who work in pharma, it's a global industry. People are working. You're working with people collaboratively in different time zones. People will be contacting you all hours of the day and night, and the tendency is to actually respond to everything, and you can't do it.
I can testify to that. Believe me, I'm usually here by 6 o'clock in the morning, and I often take calls late in the evening. So
Yeah, I understand that. Look, Richard, all I can say is I really appreciate you taking time out to talk. It was been very, very interesting, very enlightening, and I'm really grateful for you sharing your thoughts. Is there anything else you'd like to say before we close off this chat to any of the viewers?
Certainly, it's my pleasure. I'm very proud of PDA. The one thing that I would also communicate is, we obviously need the support of our customers. So if they have ideas or thoughts or questions, please feel free to reach out to us. We are anxious to get that kind of input. So.
Brilliant. Thank you. Well, look, Richard, thank you very much for your time. That was really, really interesting. If anybody would like to know more about the PDA, there will be a link through to the PDA website above this video. And if you've got any questions arising from the things that Richard said to me during this conversation, feel free to put them in the comment box below the video, or I'm sure Rich will be happy for you to message him directly any questions you might have.
You can put my email address on there if you want.
I'll do that. I'll add that as to the post as well, Richard, no problem. But so thank you very much. And everybody else, I hope you enjoyed that. As I say, if you'd like to know more about the PDA, click on the link. Until next time, as always, stay well.